Hey guys, this is Tommy from the Ravens Creek Study. Thanks again for joining us. So we've been looking at biblical theology, tracing the eternal covenant from Genesis 1 all the way to the end of the Bible. And we've come to Genesis chapter 3 where we've looked at the fall, and we're looking at the two seeds of the woman mentioned in Genesis, or the two seeds mentioned in Genesis 3:15, where there's the seed of the serpent and the seed of the woman. And we've examined that and we've said, okay, this is like unto Babylon and Zion. Babylon being the seed of the serpent, Zion being the seed of the woman. Zion and the New Jerusalem are synonymous here. And we defined Babylon last time, and I wanted to do this video as a separate video to ask the question of Zion or Babylon, because there's a nuance that takes place in the prophetic scriptures. All of the Old Testament prophets, as well as the book of Revelation, and even the apostles caught onto this and taught it, but it's such a nuanced understanding that I don't think we catch it so often. So here's what it is. When you read Jeremiah 50 and 51, which I'm not going to do because they're two very long chapters, when you read Jeremiah 50 and 51, over and over and over again, the prophet is proclaiming doom to Babylon, but every now and then, suddenly the prophet starts speaking about Jerusalem, and you start to wonder, is he talking to Jerusalem or to Babylon? It's almost as if he's saying there's the same thing here. And when you read it, and I challenge you, go and read it. He's talking about Babylon, Babylon, Babylon. Suddenly he's talking about Jerusalem, and he'll say, oh, Jerusalem, oh, Jerusalem. But then the things he's saying about Jerusalem seem to reflect what he was talking about with Babylon, and you start to ask the question, wait a second, why is he doing this? You go to Matthew chapter 2, and you find the three wise men, the three magi, the three kings, whatever you want to call them. They come to Herod, and they say, hey, we saw this star. The King of the Jews has been born. Where is he? And you have in Matthew 2:2, all of that King Herod and all of Jerusalem were saddened and disheartened over this news. What kind of Jerusalem is it that weeps at the coming of her king? For the entirety of the scripture, and we're going to go through it, through the whole of the scripture, Jerusalem has always rejoiced. Judah has always rejoiced at the messianic hope. Now suddenly you have the proclamation of the King of the Jews has been born, and Jerusalem is in anguish. What happened? You have in 1 Peter 5:13, Peter says, the saints in Babylon greet you. Hold the phone. Stop it for just a second and think about that. The saints in Babylon greet you. Babylon's been destroyed for hundreds of years. So why is Babylon suddenly being referenced in the New Testament? You have, pardon me for a second. Okay, sorry about that. You have the fact that he's writing from Jerusalem even. I mean, check it. Peter was an apostle in Jerusalem. So what's going on here? Is it Jerusalem or is it Babylon? The preterists have made the observation correctly that in Revelation, in the book of Revelation, the Babylon that's being referred to is indeed Jerusalem. The Antichrist sets up his kingdom there in Revelation 11. That's quite explicit because the temple's mentioned. It cannot be the heavenly temple. It has to be the earthly temple. The two witnesses then are in Jerusalem. You have in Daniel chapter 11, the Antichrist figure sets up his tents at the very end of the chapter, in verse 44, I think. He sets up his tent just outside of the city. So they've made the right observation, the correct observation here, that indeed the Babylon of Revelation is Jerusalem. However, what they are severely wrong in is their interpretation. They think that because the Babylon of Revelation is Jerusalem, that must mean that the whole point of the book of Revelation is AD 70 and the destruction of the temple, and therefore we are now in the new heaven and new earth because the destruction of the temple is the destruction of Babylon. That's not what the book means. That's not at all what it's saying. Jerusalem is not Babylon because it is Jewish. That's where the preterists have it wrong. That's very anti-Semitic. Jerusalem is not Babylon because it is Jewish or under the Old Covenant. It is Babylon strictly on the basis of its wicked rulers, which in Revelation is the Antichrist himself. You have things like in Zechariah chapter 14, I believe it's verse 7. It's somewhere around verse 7. It says, Judah will even fight in the armies against the coming of the Lord. Well, now hold on a second. Judah is going to fight against the Lord? Why? Because there are some in Judah, some of these wicked rulers that are condemned in Ezekiel 34, these wicked rulers who are constantly being condemned in the prophets, who have aligned themselves to the spirit of Antichrist. To this day, have aligned themselves to the spirit of Antichrist. But not all Israel is Israel, right? So we've got here Babylon in Revelation. Babylon in Revelation. This is the Antichrist Kingdom. We find that the Antichrist establishes his kingdom with Jerusalem as the epicenter. That is the capital. That's the crux. It's the zenith. We see that in Revelation 11. We see that in Revelation 13 when you compare the establishment of the altar and the image of the beast. When you compare that with all of the prophecy that's gone on before, it's explicit. We'll get there. It's explicit. It has to be Jerusalem. It was also prophesied by Daniel, and we just went through that in Daniel 11, 30 through 32. When you look at Revelation 13 and the establishment of the abomination of desolation, which is the image of the beast, and the number of the beast is then also established, that's what's happening in Daniel 11, 30 through 32. It's the abomination of desolation, spoken of by Daniel the prophet, which Jesus also cites and references. This final enactment of Babylon had its inception in Genesis chapter 4, and it's traced all the way to the end to Revelation 19. We must understand it through the context of the principalities and powers, otherwise we will. That is not just a shall, we will, absolutely will hold an anti-Semitic bent. Either it will be that we say, well, it's the seed of Satan, but Zion's the seed of the woman, and we're part of Zion, and that Jerusalem's part of the seed of Satan, so to hell with them. Or we're going to say, oh, well, because Israel and Jerusalem and the Jewish people are still under the influence of Satan, they're going to have to go through a tribulation of judgment, where that's when they're going to realize they'll see Jesus in the clouds, and that's going to be where they turn to him and become saved. But we're all going to leave. That's the same anti-Semitism that you see the preterist enacting. The only difference is that we consider the Jewish people to still be the people of God. That's the only difference. It's the exact same anti-Semitism, though. It's the exact same mindset. So, Zion. There's a war between darkness and light, between Zion and Babylon. Which one shall have the official rule over the whole earth? Shall it be Babel in the plains of Shinar? Or will God triumph and Zion be established upon the earth? When you read Genesis chapter 11 and you read Revelation chapter 13, you see both of them, all peoples, all nations, kind of join themselves to this Antichrist mentality. But when you read texts like Isaiah chapter 2 or Zechariah chapter 8, all peoples, all tribes, all nations are going up to Zion, up to Jerusalem. So there's the question, it's an epochal question. This is the question to ask. Which one is going to last unto the end of the ages? Is it going to be Babylon and the kingdom of darkness? Or is God truly going to prevail and Zion will be established? And so with that, I'm going to end, because we're going to then get into Abraham, and I want to give a little bit of a a segue into Abraham. So, thanks for listening again, and for those of you who want to hear more, please subscribe. If you have questions, comment, ask questions. I'm willing to answer. Maybe I'll do more videos like this. Thanks again for listening. Hit the subscribe button. I'll see you next time.